Hey everyone, Zach here, and welcome to the 48th lesson of this RTS tutorial series. In this video, we'll handle what to do when we're harvesting and don't have any resource buildings. This will be the final bit on harvesting we'll do as a primary topic. That said, we'll also finally take care of the sun rotation issue. That said, fire up your editor and let's get started.
Alright, I promised a while back that we would take care of our sun rotation, and let's do that right now, just so we can get out of the way. And the reason why I've delayed so long is I, again, had three different ways of handling this, and I wanted to decide what version I was going to go with. So, we're going to do something that's probably going to confuse a lot of you at the start, and I'll explain what we're doing as we get farther into it. So we're going to get rid of this custom event. We no longer care about game speed. We're going to get rid of all of the stuff related to game speed minus the game state. We still need our game state. So we still need all of this stuff. What's going to change, however, is a lot of these calculations. We still are going to be doing this on the tick. We could actually create a timer instead if we wanted to, but we're not going to. What we're going to do, however, is we're going to get rid of all of this. Alright, we're going to get our reference. We actually don't need this anymore. We do need our game time. Well, we're leaving our game time. We need our game state reference. Get it. We are going to get our, actually no, we don't need this game time. I lied. We can get rid of that game time. We need our game time, however, but we're getting it from our game state ref. So get game time as a target from there. Now, you could use an interface just like we did earlier when we passed through game time. When I say earlier, like we did with the UI for the main UI and for the game state. All right, so what we need to do is we need to move this sun, rotate it a certain amount at certain times. So what we're going to do, first off, actually, we're going to go back to our main graph here. And we're going to, unfortunately, just have to think about this in terms of 12-hour days. There's no easy way to do this without some complex scripts to make it a different time. Let's find our sun rotation here. What we want this to be is we want this to start at 6 a.m. So we want to start at sunrise. And sunrise is going to be a rotation of 180. Sorry, I had to look at my whiteboard to see what it was. So at 180, we are at 6 a.m. At negative 135, we are at 9 a.m. At negative 90, we are at noon. At negative 45, we are at 3 o'clock, which means at 0, we'll be at 6 p.m. So remember, this needs to be 180. This can also be negative 180. It doesn't matter. 180 is going to be the same direction. And notice this arrow here. This arrow points to the direction. So if I change this to negative 90, you see it's pointing directly down. If I change this to 0, it's pointing that way. So we have our east and our west set by that. Now you could reverse this by using inverse numbers in the maths we'll use. That is completely up to you. But I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to keep my other rotations. Let's update our sky sphere. So let's go to our sky sphere and hit refresh material. There we get our dusky or our dawn light. So let's go back to our sun rotation. We're getting our game time, and that means we need to change in our game state to the fact that it's 6 a.m. So let's go to our game state inside of our game settings. Game state. We have our default time. Let's also just change this for the love of God. It's going to drive me crazy. This should actually be in our clock. That's seconds. There we go. So we're setting our seconds. Our default value for everything will now be 0. It will be 0 minutes and 0 seconds, but 6 in our hours. There we go. Compile. Let's just make sure that actually says 6 a.m. Yes, it does. The sun is not moving because we haven't plugged anything into it. And yes, I am still very much aware of the typo that I intentionally put there. If you didn't see the typo, February is still spelled wrong. Okay, so what we're going to do is if we know that we have a 12-hour day, we know that the rotation is a 360 circle that has to make around our map, and we know that, say, 180 is 6 a.m. and noon is -90, then we can work out that it roughly needs to move 0.0041 or 42 actually degrees every game second. This equates to roughly 15 units an hour. So I'm just gonna pop something up on screen real quick that will show how I've worked this out. So there we are. We have this written out. We have our times. We have we know that 15 degrees equals 1 hour. This was just me working down to the 0.0452 or it should be 0042. Sorry about that. There was a typo there. That is the actual number we're looking for. So how do we convert that maths over? Well, we don't go into our game state. We go into our sun rotation, which let's pin that after that. So we have all this information. Actually, let's open our game state for a second. What is our game time? Our game time is our hours, our minutes, and our seconds added together. We want to convert this back to our seconds. Well, our seconds are already in seconds, so we don't really need to convert that. This is like times 1 times 1 in this case, even though the number isn't going to be 1. We need to convert this to seconds, and if we think about how we've done that, well, we've taken something, we've divided it by this value. If this is the target value we want, why don't we multiply by this value? So what we'll do, we'll go into here and we'll take this value and we will multiply it by the same value we used to make seconds. So it'll be float times float, and we'll put in 3,600. And that will convert everything over to seconds. We know that every second we need to move a certain amount of degrees. We need to move 0.00416. It's actually 167. So let's do multiply again. Actually, we can get rid of this. Let's do multiply. And it'll be again float times float, because we definitely need this to be a float. And this will be 0.004167. If you want to know how I work that out, again, go back to where I put the notepad on screen and do some basic math to work out how I came up with this number. We are then going to add 90 to this, and this is just because of the fact that it's a rotation. So we need to add 90, and we're offsetting the rotation. So we are offsetting this rotation by 90 degrees. If we don't do this, yes, the sun will, the sun will rotate at the correct rate, but we will have the wrong offset, and it will rotate from a different time point than where we want it. And I can't remember what time point that is. And we're going to plug this into pitch. Now, I'm going to show you something. What we care about isn't this value, what comes out of here, because this is just dealing with the offset. We care that this value is correct. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a little debugging. We're going to add in a print string. And we're going to delete this before the video is over. So we're going to take that. We're just going to plug that into there. And we'll compile. We'll hit play. And, ooh, we are having a bit of an issue. Oh, sorry. Yeah, we also have to change one thing. This isn't working anymore, so we need to get rid of this. That little issue was another fix I forgot about. We don't keep that last bit. Instead, what we're going to do is we are going to set actor rotation. And this is handling the world location. That's why we need that offset there. So we set actor rotation instead of local rotation. Apologies about that. That is completely on me, just forgetting how we had set rotation originally and not reading the note as I made the changes to this video, or to this version of the blueprint. Alright, and we plug that into there, and everything should work smoothly. If you're looking at the timer at the side, it was actually correct. There we go. So every hour, that should increase by 15. So currently it's 90. We should see it go up to, when it gets to 7, 105. So let's just make sure it gets to 105. And if it does, then hey, this has been successful, and we can move on to the next part of the video, in which we'll take care of what happens. Sorry about that. The song went silent there because I had to sneeze. We'll take care of what happens when we get to harvesting resources when there are no buildings. All right, we're nearing the time. It's 103, 104, and 7 o'clock, 105. There we go. Our sun is now moving in time with our clock at any one of our game speeds. Here we go. It's now frozen. Nothing's happening. It's stuck there. So, that said, let's move on to how we're going to address our issue if we have no buildings when we harvest resources. Oh yeah, before we move into the section on fixing out our what do we do if we have no buildings, let's get rid of this print string. Just delete it and hook these pins up to each other. All right, that said, now let's move on to handling what happens when we have no buildings. Alright, so we've handled what happens when we harvest resources. We've handled bringing them back to our 2 resource buildings. However, we have one thing we haven't considered. Well, what happens when we don't have these buildings? If we don't have these buildings, we run into an error. Now, what that error is going to tell you is, so let me close that out. Actually, I'm going to open that back up, is that our unit harvester gets a read none error when it gets to our target location for this move to actor or location. And, you know, if you want to run it through, delete your buildings, harvest something. When it's done harvesting, close the game out, you'll get the warning messages. Let me see if I can actually find the old example of those real quick. So if you go into Window, you can get your old messages back. You go down to Developer Log. It's going to be in Message Log. So what this is saying is that it read none. There was no information it could access when it tried to read target building. Where did it try to find this? In the blueprint known as the RTS harvest unit or harvester unit. Where on this unit? Well, it tried to find it in the main graph. So the issue is going to be in the main graph. And in particular, it had the error on our move to actor or location. So our move to actor or location. It had none when it accessed none when it tried to read target building. So there is nothing in here for it to read entry point from or get the world location from. Let's look at the second line. Blueprint runtime error access none. Same blueprint. Again, on the execute function on the Uber graph, the main graph, and it's going into here. There was some error going into this move to. Well, if we think about this for a minute logically and work our way backwards, we're going to end up at the get to building resources. And the way we're going to get there is, well, where do we set our target building? Or where do we start setting it? We set it in get target building. We start then from target building. What we do is going backwards again, is we've gotten which building is nearest. And we set that to target building. To get a list of our resource buildings, to figure out which one's nearest, we have to get our buildings first. And there are 2 steps even within this one we need to consider. But we'll consider those one at a time as we address what we do when there are no buildings. So, we need to create a new branch to handle what happens when there are no buildings. So let's just make this a little bit easier for us to do. Let's highlight everything after get resource buildings. And let's move this just a wee bit over. That way we have a little bit of room. And take this bottom set of nodes here and just move it downwards, this early end harvest. Or early harvest end. Alright, so we're going to have the branch in here. And let's just set this branch up. So we know what we want to do on the true. We know we want to get the distance of the buildings. So we know we're going to pass through. There are buildings. But what type of buildings? We're checking resource buildings at this distance. So not only do we need buildings, they need to be resource buildings. Which means when we go into our resource, get resource buildings, and we consider what we have to do here, there's really 3 possible endings here. There is, we come in, we update our building list, and there are no buildings. So that's ending 1. Ending 2, we have buildings. None of them are resource buildings. Ending 3, we have buildings, and some of them, or all of them, doesn't matter, happen to be resource buildings. So we have 3 possible endings. Now, in actuality, for our purposes, we think about this logically. We really only have 2 types we care about. There's resource buildings, or there are no resource buildings. It doesn't matter if there are buildings but they're not resource. They aren't resource buildings. We don't care about them. We don't put them in the new array over here. So what we need to do is we need to actually think about how can we handle putting that information out. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to create a new local variable. It's going to be a Boolean, so we need to change the type, and that would be valid target is or actually, we're going to do valid target possible. I like making it a question, and I realize this doesn't sound like one, but it's how it's going to work. And, well, we need to pass this information out. So let's just set that up real quick. Let's grab this variable. We'll get it. We're going to pass it out on this return node, and we'll just do possible is possible target available. There's my question version of it. And I know we're going to need to move this down just a bit. We're going to need to move it probably even more. But what we need to do is we also need to move all of this. Because what we need when we think about this is first check we have to do is, before we even get into this array, are there buildings? If there are not, then the array is going to just go to completed. It doesn't have anything to run through. I'm empty. See ya kind of thing. So we need to handle what happens when that is the case. So we're going to take everything from the loop forward and just move this over. Now leave the list of buildings there because we need to get that for a second. We're going to break the array just for a moment. We're going to break the execute pin off there for a moment. We're going to create a branch here. And let's just very quickly take care of the false. So the false is going to be there are no buildings. So we're going to take our target is valid. Just pass that down there. And we're going to be moving this way. In fact, we're going to put a reroute in here because I know we're going to need one. We're just going to plug that directly into that reroute. There we go. Alright, so how do we get this condition? Well, you should know this one by now. This is something we've done several times. We're going to drag off of this. We're going to get the last index. So is the last item in this list greater or equal to 0? Remember, in Unreal, an empty array is going to return a value of -1. So if it's greater than or equal to 0, there is at least one index in there. So if it's 0, there is one index. If the last index is 1, then there is 2 indexes in there. So if the last index is at least 0. So let's just move this along to make this a little bit easier to deal with. Actually, let's not move it as much as I was there. There we go. We need a reroute in here. Let's move that way. Just gonna try to give myself a little bit of room to make this look neat. There are going to be some crossing lines, unfortunately. Take from this reroute or from the main part if you don't put reroutes in and plug into your array there. And I'm going to put a couple more reroutes in. I was on the wrong line. I'm going to put a couple more reroutes in on the correct line just so this is a bit easier to visibly read. There we go. So if there are buildings and we want to run this, now, we could set at this point, hey, it's possible. There's a target possible. What happens if none of them are resource targets? It's going to run through. It's going to go, oh, hey, we have a possible target. No, we don't. There's nothing here for us. These two will crap out, and our target building won't be set, and we'll get a read none error. So we need to consider, how do we handle, well, there is a valid, target here. Now, what we could do is we have this already set to default of false. We could just pass this through at the end of one of the add uniques and go, if there is something in this add unique, then, or if we run this add unique, that is, then make this true. That is one option. Now, that's a very viable option. In fact, that might be the easiest option to go through. But I'm a paranoid sort, and I'm worried that for some reason the system is going to accidentally miss that, or let's say. So the other option we can do, and actually we might include both these steps. It doesn't actually cause any problems if you include both steps. Is we could instead put a branch off this completed. And then both the true and the false are going to go into this branch. It doesn't matter. But let's just actually deal with the... Actually, what we're going to do is we're going to put a reroute here. The two falses will go together. That way we only have to use some of these nodes once. And what the false will be is there'll be no valid building that they can go to. Put another reroute in there. Plug that into there. And the true will be, well, the building is valid. There's a possibly valid target for them. And we're just going to go into there, into that reroute after the set false. So how do we get this? Well, we're going to repeat what we just did a second ago. We're going to repeat this list of constructed buildings last index stick. But we're going to do it with resource buildings. Last index greater than or equal to 0. The amount of times I use these two nodes together, I might honestly just create a pure function in my function library that I can call up that has a plugin for an array. Check last array value is greater than 0 kind of function. Might save me some room. Alright, so that should actually work. So let's compile this. Let's go back to our event graph before we test this, because we actually need to plug this is possible into our condition. And if it is possible, then we want this to run. But if it isn't, well, I've decided I'm going to want my unit to move. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take myself, my AI controller, I'm going to move to location or target, and control W them down here. And I'm going to plug these into the false. So I'm still going to move the unit when harvesting is done. I'm just going to move it somewhere else. And where I'm going to move it to, I'm going to grab the self here, I'm going to put a reroute in, is I'm going to move it to a new location, just a little bit farther away from the tree. So I'm going to get its current location. So we'll get capsule component first, most likely, but let's try get world. It's just the self itself. Get world location, and we'll use a capsule component, not the deselection icon, and the other ones don't really work as well either. Plug that into the reroute. So sometimes, as I mentioned in an earlier video, you can't get what you're looking for off the reroutes. The easiest way to do that is just search on the sort of parent item, in this case the self, what you're looking for, and then unconnect the two items, and then connect it to the reroute when you want where you want it. All right, I'm going to split this pin, and then I'm going to take this bottom set of nodes again and just move it a little bit further down because I'm feeling a bit crowded. There we go. And I'm just going to move it on the x-axis. So I'm going to drag off the y-axis. I'm going to do make vector. I'm going to plug the y into the y. And I'm just going to return value into that z there. Plug the z into the z. Sorry, I'm going to plug the goal actor into the return value into the goal actor. Man, I don't know why I said the z into the goal actor. And I'm going to do right click, random float in range, and my min's gonna be say 250, and my max will be 1,000. All right, off the return x value, I'm gonna do plus float, and I'm gonna add in this random float there. And in fact, actually, so these pins don't cross, I'm just gonna reorganize them. There we go. It doesn't matter. Remember, added to properties. Doesn't matter what order you do your addition in. If you don't know what that means, I do advise looking that up. And move the output pin into this return value here. And there we go. So let's test this out. I'm going to move this to the other screen so I can actually calculate when the harvest will be done. If you don't know how I'm doing that, again, I've been using this going into my start harvest and just watching my harvested to see when it's nearing 1. So I'm going to hit play, and I'm going to select my harvester unit. Actually, hang on 1 second. I want to see something. I'm going to hit play again. All right, so what I want to see is working. It's just want to make sure that the is spawn feature is set. So I'm going to send this character to a tree, this harvester to a tree. I'm going to watch it start harvesting. And we are currently at 0.02, so I'm going to speed this up. I'm going to pause the video, and when we are closer to 0.75, I will come back so you can see what happens when they finish up. That said, see you in a second. Okay, the unit's now at 75% full, and in a second we'll see it move. We are now nearing 0.9, or just past 0.9 now, 0.95, and now. Unit picked a random direction and it moved there. Inventory is full. Let's end it, and no errors. So that resolves what to do if we don't have buildings. From here, we're going to actually move on to the unit recruitment. Before we get into, yep, it's there, what I was looking for earlier. Before we get into how to handle special production resources, I can't say how many videos that will take while I've done the prep work for this for a while, actually. It is a very complex and number of simple steps we have to do. So when I say it's complex and number of simple steps, we have a lot of very simple steps that we have to do that add up. Remember, a lot of this stuff is fairly easy. So if you're struggling with it, think about it in the smallest possible component. Think about the smallest possible part of it that you need to achieve and work on that. Once you've worked that out, the next step becomes easier. And the next step after that becomes easier. But it's always, don't think about the big picture. Yes, have an end goal for what you want to do, but always start with what's the smallest part of it that I need to address. So when we think about the smallest part for what we need to address for, the units, well, the smallest part we're going to need to address is how do we actually tell it we need a unit? And that one you've always done at the very start if you think about this. Every time we want to spawn something in, we've always started with some buttons, even if they have no function yet. And that way we have something at least we can anchor to, even if it's a test thing we're spawning in. In fact, actually, since we only have 2 unit types, our harvester unit and our unit master, and the unit master is not one we'll end up using too much, we're actually going to have 3 tests buttons pretty much and 1 actual button until we get everything set up. So that said, if you've liked the series of this video, go ahead and drop that like button so that people know about this series and so that I know that I'm bringing you content that you appreciate and value. In addition, make sure to hit that subscribe and notify icon so you know when the next tutorial is out. I look forward to seeing you in that video, and as always, I hope that you have a wonderful day.